All right, coming to you when you want it.
Welcome into the late morning sports roundup. I'm your host, Adam Blankenship, here at JR Sports Bar and Grill on this rainy Tuesday afternoon. My co-host Scott Hardy is not able to be in today, so we got Mr. Luke Robinson filling in with me. Luke, you doing okay today?
Yeah, man, I'm doing pretty good. It is a dreary day, but it's been so hot and miserable. It feels kind of good to have a nice rainstorm, not one of those faux rainstorms like we had yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. And my yard definitely needs this rain because it's about burned up right now, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's been kind of rough. But I'll tell you, I know we want to talk local here starting off, and it just dawned on me what I can talk about and the reason that I'm actually kind of fatigued today. Last night, I took my son, Truett, who is 12 years old, and his buddy, Robert Bice, who's the son of Brian Bice, owns Bice Motors here in Lake City, and a longtime sponsor of all our programming and great guy. And Justin Clayton, who has worked with us many times over. We all went on the Lake City Striper Guide Service fishing trip with David Hare.
Oh, nice.
And it was phenomenal. I know nothing about fishing. And what I did, I'm going to write an article about it just for B Metro Magazine. And so I just really wanted to go in there and just dive head first, learn as much about fishing as I could, and sort of a crash course thing. It's not a passion of mine like Brett Pritchard, but it was a lot of fun. You learn so much. I'll tell you, I didn't know this. Okay, just a few things. Let's throw them out there. Honestly, my whole experience with fishing could probably be defined by saltine crackers or Wonder Bread and a rusty hook and a cane pole.
Yeah.
I think the last time I actually caught a fish, I caught a catfish in the eye.
Yeah.
By accident.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I thought we were just going for bass fish. I just thought bass is bass. I mean, yeah, there's some bass are bigger than other bass, and there's probably some genus or category they fall into that I don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't realize that striper bass, and people would say striper bass, I thought, okay, that just means largemouth bass like everybody else, or the little bass you catch and eat as a kid or whatever. But they're a lot different. They're a much bigger deal. Do you know anything about fishing?
I do not.
Okay.
I know that my line gets caught in the tree usually, and I have to cut it.
Well, see, and that's another thing. I thought you fish where there's the most trash and old Christmas trees and dead stumps and grassy areas. That's not really the case. We went fishing in some of the deepest parts of Lake Martin for these striper that you put your line out there and you use something called gizzard shad. I had no idea what that was. I thought it might be something in me, like a gizzard. Luke, we got to take your gizzard shad out. But so we had 6 lines out, and David Hare just does. I don't know how he does it all. You do it all blindfolded. He knows. He had a remote control for the boat, for the trolling motor. He can drive the boat better via remote control than I can drive it in the boat with guidance.
And that's impressive with being dark and everything too.
It was so cool. But so we get out in the middle of the lake and we start fishing. He said, he had a fish finder. I couldn't read it. I mean, it's not like this that you see fish on the thing. He's like, yeah, that means they're fish here. That means they're. I said, just quit trying to explain it. But the striper, they actually bring into the lake and they introduce them. They're saltwater fish.
Really?
And they introduce them to the lake. I mean, the Fish and Game Board or the state of Alabama or whomever, and they have about a 50-60% survival rate. So they have a lot of them that get into the lake that are very young, and some of them can live to be 35 years old.
Wow.
I mean, it's crazy. And so my son, we didn't catch a lot of fish last night. They just weren't out there biting a lot. We were out from about 6:30 to 12:30. I mean, it was a long night. I didn't get into my bed till about 1:30. So my son did reel in a 14-pound striper bass. Wow. And it was a cool moment. He loved it. And he's not a fishing guy. I mean, he likes it, but he's been talking about it. And I said, well, if we're going to do it, let's do it with David Hare. Let's do it right. I highly recommend anybody. You cannot be more of a novice fisherman than I am. And you cannot have less of a passion for it. I mean, I don't have a dislike for it. Fishing doesn't move my meter.
Yeah.
And I had a blast. I mean, we caught 2 fish the whole night because it just wasn't a good night. I thought, that's another thing I thought, we almost had a storm, or we had a little bit of a storm, so the fish will be biting. Because you always hear that. And that's not really, that really didn't have a lot to do with it.
That's surprising. What kind of fight did a 14-pound fish
put up a big fight. And I did get a bite on my reel. And the reel bent almost into the water. And he said, and it ended up breaking the line. but he said, I don't know what you had, but it was going to be big. And
Wow.
so it could have been a 50-pound catfish. I mean, I don't know, but it's really interesting. The type of fish we were fishing for, I didn't know existed. I didn't know that was part of the lake, and I certainly didn't know that they introduced a saltwater fish into our lake. But they get so deep and so cold, somehow they're able to survive. Now, not all of them survive, but it's just for sport fishing, and it's very, very cool. And my son's going to have his fish mounted. Robert Bice caught about a 12-pounder, I think, or 11-pounder, and he's going to get his mounted.
So what you're saying is you went out there and they dominated you.
Dominated
fishing.
I have no problem saying they dominated. I knew they would. But it was Dave. The thing that was really great about David is the time flew by. You know, part of fishing is you kind of want to get lost in the moment. Time stands still but goes by quickly at the same time, and you can sort of get lost in thought. Even when it was just dead silence out there and everybody was kind of just sort of milling about, you look up and you're like, oh my gosh, it's 10:30 at night. Yeah. And I can't believe we've been out here that long and we've done so much and learned so much. That was the fascinating thing for me. Was I didn't catch fish, but I caught knowledge.
There you go. That's even better right there, you know.
But it was great. I got to say, I could not recommend David Hare and Ellick City Guide Service any more than I do right now. And I don't know a thing about fishing. So even if you know everything in the world about fishing,
there's still a lot to learn, right?
There's still a lot to learn, and there's still a lot of places to go and a lot of fun. Some of the places we went, and I can't divulge all of them. It's sort of just common courtesy because you don't want to divulge all the places he goes because they're his spots. Yeah, you have to go fishing with Ellick City Guide Service. And I'll tell you another cool thing. I had no idea this technology existed. He had some kind of GPS system that once he locks onto a place that you would call a fishing hole, so to speak, then he would lock into that, and his trolling motor would deploy, again, it's remote control, and it would lock into a satellite that would keep him at, if the waves came through, if the current changed, if the wind blew, the boat would automatically go to that same spot.
That's amazing.
It was ridiculous. I mean, it was so cool. And again, I felt like I was cheating a little bit at first, like the fish, but then you realize, okay, this is a big lake. The fish have a lot of, you're playing hide and go seek. In Michael Jordan's mansion, and you're trying to find a mouse. I mean, it's very difficult. And so you go out there, and because they have a lot of options to eat. I mean, there's a lot of things for those fish to eat, so you got to hope they want to take one of those. Yeah. And the other thing that was weird to me, and he said there's no rhyme or reason to this, they really went after this one line. They were all down there the same depth. They all had the same bait, but we caught both fish on the same rod, and that's the same rod that I also got my big strike on, and that's the rod that got the most hits. Like every now and again, they put these little jingle bells kind of looking things on the tip of the rod because there's 6 of them out there and it's dark, and you can't, they bob and they do, and so you can't just react every time you see a bob. But if that thing jingles, something has happened. Either somebody's hit it with their leg, which happened a lot, or that the fish is on there. And so, for anybody listening that's thinking Luke is the dumbest person, we all know this stuff. I didn't know any of it.
This is the first I've heard it too. So
it was so cool. I was really impressed with his knowledge, and he never stopped talking about it. It was never a moment where I thought, I'm going to ask him something and he's not going to know the answer. No, he knew the answer to all of it.
Wow. So his experience that he's had fishing Lake Martin really brings that whole service into a head right there, and makes it worthwhile and worth the money as well to do that, right?
He also told the most amazing story, and in his defense, David doesn't talk quite as fast as I do. Yeah. And he said, this story's going to take a while. Because I said, well, we got nothing but time. We're sitting here on the boat. And I said, what's the craziest story that has happened to you since you've been doing this? Yeah. So my recommendation is, if he's up for sharing it again, to ask David what the craziest story is that has happened to him since he's been doing this. And it's a pretty wild story. Really? It takes a while. And again, David does not talk as quickly as I do. I could probably do it in 5 minutes. It might take him 10. But he tells it with incredible detail and remembering it so vividly. Yeah,
and that's the whole point too. Is those old fishing tales right there are always best told by the one who lived it.
And the funkiest thing about this fish story, there's not a fish involved. So I'm just going to leave it at that. If he wants to share the story with somebody, but The other thing is call David Hare and Ellick City Guide Service as quickly as you can. Get a spot reserved. I was fortunate beyond fortunate to get a spot. I think he had a cancellation, and I talked to him about doing this because I wanted to write an article about it and just tell the whole story of this whole thing. And so he was able to work us in there. And he knew also that my kids were going back to Ohio at the end of this week, and so it worked out. But I cannot brag enough on it. I mean, I hadn't been able to really even think about it as much because I got up this morning about 6, went into work, and I've been busy at work, come straight here, and I've been tired because I got in about 1:30. And so this is the first time I've really had to even remember it, reflect on it at all, and it was just a cool moment.
Oh, that's awesome, and it's nice to hear those type of stories too. I've heard a lot of good things about what they're doing over there as well. So, of course, is there, you got a contact number or anything you want to plug for?
Yes, I do. Actually, I'll give out his cell number. I hope that he doesn't mind about that. I don't think he will, because I think that that's what he basically uses for everybody to get in touch with him. But his number is 256-401-3089. That's Ellick City Guide Service. Look, I know if you call and you say, well, I just don't know if I want to spend the money to do this. I'm telling you, it's an experience you'll never, ever forget. My son, the pictures, go on my Facebook page and go on the Sports Blitz Live Facebook page, because I think they're all on there. My son in the picture with that striper bass, and he's holding it, and you can see the smile. I mean, he's ear-to-ear smiles. And I know there are a lot of kids out there who've caught much bigger fish, but for my son, it was the first time he's ever caught anything like that. And he said, I said, do you want us to clean it? You want to eat it? You want to throw it back? He said, no, I want to mount that thing. I want that thing up on my wall.
I don't blame him. I don't blame him.
And so I said, hey, buddy, that's what we'll do for you.
Yeah. Well, that's a great story there. Talking about the guide service, and it's nice to hear those type of stories and everything as well. We're up against our first break. We'll be right back with you after this break. More with the Lake Martin Sports Roundup.
That's good that you're doing it.
Right, coming back to you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to the Lake Martin Sports Roundup. I'm your host, Adam Blankenship, here with Luke Robinson at JR Sports Bar and Grill. Make sure you get up here tonight and get you some of the best chicken fingers, hot wings, cheeseburgers, anything you think of in town. We're sitting up here tonight. We just have a fun little story from Luke about out to the guide service and going out last night and getting some good fishing done. And a couple of local things I want to touch on right now is, if you guys remember, Kinsley Blassingame from Horseshoe Bend. She's been a friend of the show. We've had her on a couple of weeks ago. Her and the Horseshoe Bend softball team, and we talked about her and how well she's pitched. Just a couple of numbers: 145 ERA, 289 Ks, and 222 innings. And the reason why I bring that up is she's committed to Troy University. So that's a great thing right there. That's nice to see. Is some of these local kids and local teams are getting scholarship offers. So that's something to be proud of right there at Horseshoe Bend. And also another story is Benj Russell grad Clarence Daniel, who ran track at Ole Miss, is being inducted to the Ole Miss M Club Alumni Hall of Fame. He was the first African member of the track and field team at Ole Miss, and he graduated from Benj Russell in 1979. He still holds the school record for indoor 400 meters. That's pretty impressive right there, Luke. I mean, he ran there in the 80s. So I mean, that's a record that's stuck. So he must have been booking it, But he was a 3-time SEC champ and also a 2-time All-American during his career. So congratulations to him, and we're going to follow up more with that story. We're going to try to get him in here for an interview in the next week or so, and talk to him more about that. But so just catch you up a little bit on what's going on local. We'll be right back here shortly. Let's take another quick little break and be more with you on Lake Martin Sports Roundup right after this.
Right coming to you in 5, 4.
Welcome back to the Late March Sports Roundup. I'm your host, Adam Blankenship, here with Luke Robinson. Kicking off this next segment here, we kind of touched base a little bit on what's going on local. Had some good stories about Out to the Guide service as well from Luke, but now I know we're going to get into your favorite topic and what's been going on really. Of course, Media Days is coming up. We'll discuss that later on, but Nike had a huge camp here recently. You want to share a little bit of your knowledge about that? I know you've watched it, I guess, tons of it and kept up with it a lot over the past week or so.
Yeah, my kids will tell you I've made them watch a lot of football, and they kept saying, this isn't football. They're not really tackling. And I said, well, it's letting you know what kind of talent some of these kids have. But the opening has gotten to be such a huge deal. I absolutely love it. I think it's really – that's the beginning of college football season to me. I know a lot of people like Media Days. Some people may say the beginning of fall camp or even the first game of the season. I think the opening now has become the beginning of the college football season.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too where you see a kid pull up in a Lamborghini covered with Florida State, and you know they had to cringe a little bit whenever they saw that picture and that tape and everything. So yeah, I agree with you with how big a deal it's become, and I've kept up a little bit. And this year I really started paying attention a little bit, so I really wasn't. I guess I wasn't as up to date on how big it actually was. So, is there some guys that you saw that you were really paying attention to over the weekend?
As I give my kids are driving us crazy, and I had to give them some more money for that crane machine they've got over here at JR Sports Bar and Grill. But, I did. I was paying attention, of course, to a lot of the SEC commits, specifically Alabama, but I thought Georgia guys really represented themselves very well. Jake Fromm, who is at one time committed to Alabama, he's from the state of Georgia. He looked incredible in one of the games at quarterback, and he may be the best future pro prospect that was there at quarterback.
Oh, wow.
Tua Tagovailoa, who is committed to Alabama, the lefty out of Hawaii. He was phenomenal. He was actually the MVP of the opening. He was also the winner of the Elite 11 Challenge. He didn't have the best game, his first game that I saw him play, but in the championship, he was throwing darts, and he looked fantastic. Alabama fans ought to be really fired up about the possibilities for Tua Tagovailoa going forward. Najee Harris, the number one prospect in the country out of California, Los Angeles area, he did pretty well. But it's not really a competition for running backs to show out. Yeah. Anthony McFarland, a kid out of Maryland that Alabama is recruiting, I think he'll be on campus this weekend. He looked okay as an all-purpose back. Coming out of the backfield, he had a wheel route for a touchdown. Then the receivers were a pretty big story. Jerry Jeudy out of Deerfield Beach, down there around Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley Way, he was very good. People will remember he dropped an 80-yard bomb from Tua Tagovailoa in their game in the first game I saw him play. But after that, I mean, he dropped one and Tua put it right where it needed to be, and Jeudy just took his eyes off of it. But after that, Jerry Jeudy was if he wasn't the best receiver there, he was the second best receiver there. A kid named Devonta Smith out of Louisiana, he looked really good. He's going to commit on August 15th, and it looks very good for Alabama there. I think he is. Some services have him a 5-star, others have him a high 4-star. Jerry Jeudy kind of the same way. Let's think who else was out there.
Who is the kid? You told me about a kid. I want to say he's from Texas. You said that he's probably one of the
Terrell
best.
Shavers.
But was he there this
Yes,
weekend?
he was there, and he did. If you had said, Luke, bet money on a kid that's going to go there and blow everybody away and become a 5-star, I would have bet good money on Terrell Shavers. It just never gelled.
Yeah.
And again, as a receiver, if you don't get the good rhythm going with your quarterback initially,
he's going to look away from
and it's very quick. I mean, it all happens so fast. I mean, they're out there for about a week, but you've only got so much time to impress everybody, and everybody's trying to run fast, and everybody's trying to do this. Terrell Shavers had a couple of nice catches. He actually had a touchdown, I think, and a 2-point conversion I saw, but he didn't have the wow moment that I thought he was going to have. This kid is a legit 6'6". He's 185, 190 pounds, runs like a deer, got good hands. It just never materialized for him to have the breakout moment. I mean, if you saw Julio Jones play a game against, I don't know, pull somebody out of the air, some non-Tennessee, maybe an Ole Miss game where he didn't have a lot of catches, you might say, well, what's the big deal about him? But you just didn't see his moment. You saw Jerry Judy's moment. You saw a kid named Jeff Thomas, who I love a lot, out of East St. Louis. He was the fastest receiver there, and it apparently wasn't all that close. I mean, he blew everybody away. He wants to go to Alabama. And I know everybody's saying I'm just a Bammer saying that. He wanted to commit to Alabama. He has said that. But Alabama basically told him, you have to get your grades in order. Yeah. And there are a couple of off-the-field things, too, that I think they need to get straightened out with him. But if he gets his grades up, he might be the number one receiver prospect in the country. He is phenomenal. I don't throw around the term David Palmer-esque very often because I grew up in a David Palmer era, went to Alabama with David Palmer, played basketball with him. There was nobody like him. He was ridiculous. He is
the best athlete you've seen?
Probably. And the reason I say that, and I was an SAE at Alabama. So we had a basketball court out there, and that's when they had the athletic dorm. The players would come over and play us. We had a goal that was about 9.5 feet, so everybody loved to come over there and dunk all the time. And I remember I played against Darrell Blackburn. You remember him? You're maybe too young, but number 44, your program number 1 in your heart. He was awesome. He ended up having to give up the game, I want to say, for a kidney problem. But he was going to be an All-American in my book. I don't think there was any doubt about it. But we had a bunch of kids come over and play all the time. And I used to play basketball with David Palmer some. Antonio Langham would come over. He was great. But Palmer was just ridiculous. And when you see him, he's so unassuming. He's so small. You think, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Whatever it is, whatever he needed to do, he did it. If he needed to run just one little bit faster, that's what he'd do. But he never did more than that. Yeah. He'd do whatever it took to beat you. Yeah. And so he was never going to blow you away. But if he needed to make a juke jive left-right move to beat you, that's what he'd do. Yeah. But Jeff Thomas is kind of that guy, but there'll never be another David Palmer. It's like saying somebody looks like Bo Jackson or Herschel Walker. Yeah. It's just they don't look like Bo Jackson or Herschel Walker. Yeah. I mean, they get close, but they aren't those guys.
So what you're saying is, during your college years, they came over to the house and they just completely dominated everybody, basically.
Not necessarily. They wouldn't come over and like as a group, as a horde of players. They'd come over and they'd want to make it kind of even. They didn't want to come over and
just run the entire house.
They'd say, okay, it'd be me and
well, see, that was kind of good because you had some height. Yeah, you had some height too. So
and then they'd have a couple of big boys. They'd have a couple of offensive linemen. And they'd have another guy from the house. And it was just fun. I mean, everybody got along great, and it was a lot of fun. But going back to the opening for a minute and talking about Marvin Wilson, the number 1 defensive tackle in the country out of Texas, he looked really good. I mean, he looks really mean. He looks mean, man. He's going to be a guy that's going to be very highly recruited. Alabama is way up on his list. Auburn got a commitment from a kid down in Florida whose sister is going to Auburn as well. And so he announced that commitment at the opening on TV, which was pretty cool. And then Alabama had another guy out there named Alex Leatherwood, who was, if Marvin Wilson wasn't the talk, I think this guy was up there as the talk. Yeah. He's an offensive lineman. Now, another kid, I want to say his name is Sorrell or Forrester Sorrell. He's from Washington. Alabama's been associated with him, but I hadn't paid much attention because he's so far away.
Yeah.
But he was named the offensive line MVP. Nick Brahms is the Auburn kid. His name escaped me for a second. But a lot of good quarterback play. I thought this was the best group of quarterbacks I've seen since I've been following this. And this event has put out kids like Jameis Winston, has put out kids like the kid from Georgia who was just there, who's the quarterback of the Detroit Lions. Why was I'm blanking?
Stafford, Greg Stafford.
Matt Stafford. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's put out some really big names throughout. I want to say Jared Goff, the number 1 pick in the draft this past year, went to this event. So, I mean, this has got the cream of the cream. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So, very, very exciting, and I loved every minute of it.
Okay, and we'll touch base more on that too. We're up against a break here. Give us. We'll be right back with you. Late March Sports Roundup right after this. Welcome back to the Late Martin Sports Roundup. I'm your host, Adam Blankenship, here with Luke Robinson at JR Sports Bar and Grill here in downtown Alex City. Coming in here tonight and get you some of the best chicken fingers, wings, and burgers in town. Luke, I hated to cut you off right there before the last break, but is there anything else you want to touch on about the opening? I mean, you were talking about some of the best. You said some of the best quarterbacks and stuff that you've seen come through there. Or a lot of these guys SEC commits, or you see. Is Michigan kind of reaching down here and pulling some of the players?
Yeah, Michigan actually was very prominently featured throughout, and they had a bunch of commits. It was great the way they broke up the teams. I'll tell you, it was the usual suspects, really. I mean, Alabama on one team, Alabama had 6 commits. Oklahoma had 8 commits. I was just on one team.
That's what I was going to ask you about, because I was reading and saying there's a lot of Alabama players all on one team, so it's kind of fun to watch and see what could be the future and all that kind of stuff.
I like that a lot more, and I wish that they would do that more. The problem with doing that is I think when they set the rosters, and I don't know this for certain, but they obviously don't know. You know, maybe somebody doesn't want to commit right then, and so they may somebody may have already flipped a commitment by then. So it's kind of hard. I think it just worked out this way. They may even have a draft for it. I'm not even sure how it works, but Alabama and Oklahoma, Ohio State had a bunch of guys there. Michigan had a bunch of guys there. USC had a kid, a running back named Carr, that looked very good, number 3 running back in the country. The kid, Najee Harris, is the number 1 player in the country. He's committed to Alabama from Los Angeles, the running back. The second best running back that's in the country is a guy named Cam Akers, who was also committed to Alabama with Najee Harris at one point.
Oh, wow.
Cam Akers has since decommitted. He's out of Mississippi. A lot of people think he'll end up at Ole Miss, but who knows what happens there. And then
if the price is right.
If the price is right, he may end up there. And the receivers, it was definitely the best group of receivers I've seen. There's a kid named Nico Collins who plays at Clay Chalkville, and he played with T.J. Simmons, who signed with Bama this past year. And Nico looked okay. He didn't do anything out of the ordinary. But it sounds like he's leaning to Michigan.
I was going to say, didn't he decommit, or he was going to, and started? He
is not committed to Alabama. I think Alabama wants him. I mean, you'll hear a lot of people say, "Well, Alabama doesn't really want him." That's not true.
Yeah,
Alabama does want this kid. But when you're Alabama right now, you have different problems than say Missouri.
Yeah,
no doubt. You have a lot of kids that want to commit to you, and so you can't just take anybody's commitment, because if you do, you might pass up on a kid that's is a future All-Pro instead of a guy that you think is going to be really, really good. And that's a good problem to have. It's better to have that problem than the problem Alabama had recruiting under Mike Shula.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I do a podcast called At Talking Tuscaloosa, and I was talking to my buddy Jimmy Stein about this, that the problems Alabama has now in recruiting are so much different than we had 10, 15 years ago, where if they had this event like the opening, Alabama didn't have anybody going there.
Right. Yeah.
We were watching the Ohio States and USC's and Texas's have all these kids.
Exactly.
And we couldn't get our kids a sniff over there. We were begging Tyrone Prothro to come, and I love Tyrone Prothro.
Right.
But Tyrone Prothro, the days of having to rely on a one-man team, which is essentially that team was kind of a one-man team, and you saw what happened when he went out back in 2005. It's not going to be that way for Alabama anymore. They got too much depth. And the other thing that Ohio State and Alabama and USC and Michigan coming up now, Michigan State actually had a bunch of guys there too. LSU had a bunch of guys there. That those teams have now. The reason they have to get all these guys in, all the good players, they got to have more depth. Every week when a team plays Alabama or a team plays Ohio State or a team plays LSU, that's the biggest game for that team, most likely for the year.
No
I mean,
doubt.
They circle that. And so, yes, the big names can be intimidating going in, and that can help occasionally, but it can also do the reverse where everybody's fired up to play you. Mm-hmm. Everybody's not going to be fired up to play Purdue every week.
Exactly.
Everybody's not going to be fired up to play Mississippi State every week.
Exactly right.
You should be, and in theory, you should be.
But it's not humanly possible.
That's,
you know what I mean?
Exactly right.
It's just not going to happen that way.
And so that's why Alabama has to have the depth they do, because when they get as many good shots as they get, you've got to have some folks, because folks are going to get hurt. I mean, Kenyon Drake got hurt last year. You remember him? And, it turned out Alabama needed him. They were able to get through it because they had some running back depth. That's going to be a big issue for this year. But Alabama's addressing that with their running back recruiting this year, and the opening was a ton of fun. If you get an opportunity, I think ESPNU will replay it. I would highly recommend watching.
Well, I got a question for you. Do you think Michigan is going to be here to stay, or you think it's another flash in the pan type program where they're the hot topic right now and everybody wants to go there? Do you think they're going to continue that, or do you think Harbaugh is going to leave like he has everywhere else?
First of all, I don't want to say he's going to leave because a lot of those same people said Saban was going to do the same thing to Alabama, and Saban could coach for another 4, 5, 8 years. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I do think Harbaugh is young enough where I do think he wants to be back in the pros. I do think he's a little coaching ADD. And it's funny you bring him up. I don't know what your definition of stay is. This is what I predicted Michigan for this year in my national predictions. I said that Michigan will be undefeated, headed to Columbus to play Ohio State. Ohio State beats them. And Ohio State may have 2 losses because they go to Oklahoma the 3rd week of the season. Mm-hmm. That's a big game. And they might have another loss, too. They go to Wisconsin. They go to Michigan State. They may lose one of those. But they would get the nod going to the Big Ten championship game over Michigan because of the head-to-head. Yeah. So Ohio State knocks them out of the race completely, in my opinion. And then what happens is you have a Final Four of, I said, Clemson, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Notre Dame. And the reason I based it on those 4 teams, and I'll come back to Michigan in a second, is because I'm a firm believer in good teams. The championship teams generally have several factors, and I weigh first talent, and then I weigh schedule. And I think that Alabama has the talent. Their schedule is tough, but it's manageable. I think they can get through it. And I think Clemson, you look at if Clemson can get by at Auburn and at Florida State, it's a cakewalk to me. Definitely. And then you look at Notre Dame's schedule. I mean, where are the places they could fall? Are they going to lose to Texas? Yeah. That's one of their toughest road games, and I don't think they will. No. In the ACC, they avoid Clemson, and they avoid Florida State this year, I think. They may play Florida State, but if they play them, they play them at home. So they avoid a lot of the pitfalls where, and I said in the ACC, a lot of people know they've got to play 6 ACC games a year now. So I think that I just look at their schedule and I look at their talent, and I say Notre Dame can get there. I don't think Notre Dame's one of the best 4 teams in the country. I just think looking at their schedule. And then Oklahoma's got Baker Mayfield. I think they'll have that. They have 2 marquee out-of-conference games against Houston to open it up.
Which is going to be an interesting game right there. That's going to be a really interesting game.
And they've got, if you remember, they've got one of their defensive backs just got in a lot of trouble, so he'll be out of the game. Houston brings back a lot of talent. And then they got Ohio State 3rd week of the season at home. And if they get by that game, I mean, where are their pitfalls now in the Big 12 with Baylor's problems? Yep. With Texas still being what they are. Yeah. I mean, exactly where do you think they're going to lose?
Exactly. Exactly. And another thing that you mentioned about Michigan, or talking about Michigan, and you say you look at schedule, look at talent. Also consider depth. Like you were talking about that depth and having to have that depth. I think that's the reason why Ohio State will end up beating them, because games like that are won in the 3rd and 4th quarter. And that's what's going to get you those wins in the playoff games too, because those teams that are left are stacked from top to bottom, from senior to freshman. So I think that's something. I guess give Harbaugh, give him a couple more years to get some of those players in there, and that's kind of what I pay attention to as well. I kind of thought that about Ole Miss. I figured they would have been, I guess, about ready, because they've had a string of recruiting classes now that's been pretty deep as well.
Let me say this about Ole Miss, and the SEC Network is doing something great this year. SEC in 60, and they're taking 1 hour and basically recapping everybody in the SEC season. And I watched Alabama one. It was a lot of fun. And I watched the Ole Miss one the other day. I actually watched the Ole Miss-Arkansas game. Nothing defines Ole Miss like what happened to them after the Alabama game.
I don't know, losing to Memphis.
and people might say, again, it's very Bama-ish of me to talk about Alabama getting everybody's best shot, et cetera, et cetera. But see, that's when Ole Miss had the bullseye, they couldn't handle it.
Exactly.
A week or 2 later, they go to Florida and they get drummed by Will Greer. Now, he was on PEDs, but it happens. Then they go to Memphis.
We should have been legal for that team, because he needed everything he could get last year.
Then they go to Memphis, and they had a 14-0 lead. People forget they were up 14-0 on Memphis. And Memphis comes back and beats them because Ole Miss does so many stupid things, like puts Robert Kimdichie in the backfield when they need to get a yard.
Exactly.
Give it to your running back, man.
Exactly.
And then they have a chance to finally they're out of the national picture probably. They can clinch the SEC essentially if they can just get by LSU later on. but they have Arkansas at home. They have a 7-point lead, and they allow one of the most miraculous plays I've ever seen to happen. And Hunter Henry, just being the smart kid that he is, allowed it to happen. And Arkansas comes back and beats them. And not only that, they sack. Oh, Arkansas goes for 2, if you remember, in the overtime. They said that we want to end it. We don't want any more overtimes. We're done. They go for 2. They sack Allen, the quarterback, but they face mask him. So Arkansas gets another play, and Arkansas was able to convert on the second play. It's just Allen taking it in on the read, and that to me is Ole Miss.
Yeah.
And then Ole Miss buries Oklahoma State in the bowl game, but it's because there's no pressure.
Yeah, there's no pressure. There's no one. Nobody cares. Like you said, they've already folded. So I mean, and like you said, that I agree with you on that. Ole Miss will always be Ole Miss, you know. And if
it's hard to get over the hump, I mean, ask Georgia. It's very hard to get over the hump. You get to your glass ceiling, and I think that's what Mark Richt got to. He got to his 10, 11, 12 win kind of thing, and he might win the SEC occasionally. But if he won the SEC that year, he might have lost to, I don't remember who they lost to. Maybe he lost to a bad Florida team that year, and I think it kept him out of the national championship. Or he might get there in 2012, and he's got Alabama on the ropes, and then you hit a freshman named Amari Cooper on the deep pass. You can't stop T.J. Yeldon on 3rd and 4 from the 50. It was a running play. So it's crazy how these teams have their glass ceilings. And it's also crazy to me how, for the most part, a lot of these national brands always seem to find a way back. I mean, as bad as things have been for Alabama in the late 90s, early 2000s, everybody had faith Alabama would find a way back. USC found a way back. Now they're back in the hole, but they're slowly pulling their way back out. Texas has been in a little bit of a hole, but they beat Baylor at Baylor last year. They beat Oklahoma last year. Oklahoma's only lost before Clemson. I mean, it's funny to watch these. Notre Dame found a way back in the national championship game. They got drummed, but they
were there,
made it. They made it.
Get the T-shirt, you know.
That's right.
So hey, and that is funny. These programs come in kind of like fashion does, you know. The bell bottoms work his way back around, or whatever it may be. So it is the same way with that. But up against the break real fast. We'll be right back with you more at JR Sports Bar and Grill, Lake Martin Sports Roundup right after this.
All right, coming to you. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back to the Lake Martin Sports Roundup. I'm your host, Adam Blankenship, here with Luke Robinson at JR Sports Bar and Grill. Make sure you get up here tonight, get you some of the best hot wings and chicken wings here in town. We really can't thank them enough for everything they do for us here with the Sports Blitz staff. Luke, we talked a little bit about, got a little bit into college football last segment and everything, and one thing we hadn't talked on that much, and we'll get into a little bit, is SEC Media Days. Mm-hmm. Is there any kind of stories out there that you're looking at that's really kind of stuck out? I know Dan Mullen kind of butchered his today a little bit.
Yeah, I think the thing that stood out, or at least that's gotten the most talk, other than yesterday, a couple of things. Auburn, Vandy, and oh gosh, who went yesterday with Auburn? Was it Ole Miss? Or Ole Miss went today?
Yeah,
I can't remember. Well, somebody went with Florida. Florida. It was Florida, Auburn, and Vandy yesterday, and I was shocked, number one, at the lack of folks out there from the Auburn side. Now, the Alabama side tomorrow will bring out some nutcases.
The crazies, yeah.
I'm telling you, there's one dude, and you've seen his picture all over Facebook.
He's been there all week, right?
He's not right. I mean, he's just not right. They need to test him. He needs a team evaluating him 24/7. But they had maybe 10 folks there. It was, and I've been to media days, and usually there are a lot of fans there supporting. The tension and the pressure on Gus Malzahn, I mean, is very tangible. You can feel it, and I think that he got a whiff of that.
Yeah.
But so
it's like welcome back right there. Yeah. Welcome back.
Today, the story seems to have been the Mississippi State decision on Jeffrey Simmons, who you had not seen the video until today that I showed you of his interaction of the fight. His sister was in a fight with another girl, and Jeffrey Simmons jumps in it and really wails on her for about 10 solid punches. And for those who don't know, I've gone off on this before on other Sports Blitz programming. He's only going to serve a 1-game suspension. And I don't care so much that the suspension is South Alabama. I mean, you can't really help who you're playing. The 1 game is so offensive to me for seeing this. And it's so funny to see Mississippi State fan reactions talking about, well, you're not upset that Cam Robinson may not get this, or all 4 Auburn players didn't get any suspension for the dope. Man, I have video of Jeffrey Simmons hitting closed fist several times a woman.
Exactly. Just ask Ray Rice about his episode with that. I mean, good gracious.
And the explanation that was given today of, well, you don't know all the circumstances, and we don't necessarily live in that environment. I can't imagine an environment where that's ever okay.
Yeah.
And so I get it. If he was defending himself, and if a woman was attacking him, I get it. The woman was on the ground.
Yeah, the video getting just beat to pieces.
By his sister.
And I mean, the thing is there's video of him circling it around the entire time and then jumping in on her. I mean, what else do you need?
It was also a sad testament. That's the other thing. I think Greg Sankey even mentioned that. Well, it was sad that so many people were videoing it. Yeah, that's sad too. That's a sad take on society. Yeah. I'm right there with you. It's awful, but you can't suspend guys that aren't at Mississippi State. Yeah. You can only suspend the one guy that jumped in and started hitting a woman in the head.
I agree.
And to suspend him 1 game is you're essentially telling women, we should have learned something from this Baylor stuff.
Oh, definitely.
Where Baylor essentially said, we don't care about your safety. If I were a female student at Mississippi State, I would take this as you don't care so much about my safety anymore. And I would get it if 10 years ago, maybe if there hadn't been a cell phone recording it, I'd probably say, that probably sounds about right. But we saw the video, and it does make it worse. That's the thing,
is the proof. I mean, actually watching that. Yeah, and that's a good point, too, is talking about it one thing, but then actually seeing it just puts it on a whole
when you hear, okay, you hit a woman, sometimes your first reaction is, did he really hit her? I mean, or did he just sort of, was he defending himself? And you could talk yourself into believing, okay, I can see where it's justified. There is no justification for what he did.
Punching a woman while she's getting beaten on the ground already.
And so my suggestion was force him to take a redshirt year. That way he can learn from his mistake, but he doesn't get to play this year, so he is punished. But it may not penalize him in the future because he's still in school, number one. Yeah. And number 2, he can get that year back because he redshirted. I think that was fair because maybe there are some other circumstances. Maybe the girl had threatened the lives with a gun. Maybe all these things we don't know. But all I can go by is the video that I saw. And in the day and age we live in, where we have seen so many times that ignoring a female's safety can really be a horrible thing. It can be a horrible thing for her. It can be a horrible thing for your university. And Mississippi State is basically saying we think football is so much more important. And here's the other thing. Other people have said, well, he's only getting another chance because he's a 5-star. I have no problem with his getting another chance because he's a 5-star. If you're talented, you get more chances. If you're a pretty girl, you get free drinks at the bar.
Yeah.
Over it's just the way it works.
Yeah.
If you're a fast-talking, handsome dude who's got a sort of a suave air about him, you might sell better.
Yeah.
But so the fact that he's a 5-star, yes, he's going to get preferential treatment. They do at Auburn, they do at Alabama, they do at LSU, they do everywhere. But when you see the video of this and you think, I think one game's about right. You and I just have a difference of opinion about crime and punishment.
Yeah, it's crazy, and it's hard to, and like you said, it's the first time I saw the video. It was kind of hard for me because I followed the story, but I've never really got to the video part of it. So seeing that, it really hit me, and I was like, my gosh, this is ridiculous.
And again, I go back to that's the other thing, Sankey, and I think even Mullen even touched on it because somebody did ask Mullen today, and I thought it was very cool for somebody to ask this. What if that had been your daughter?
What was his reaction to that?
And I think he sort of tiptoed around it and sort of
just like he did the entire interview, huh?
Yeah, and it's just, don't try to sugarcoat this. I mean,
exactly.
We could all see. To me, if it was a 2-star guy, he'd be off team, not be in school.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So the fact that he's a 5-star guy, I don't mind getting him another chance. Same reason Jonathan Taylor got another chance at Alabama. I didn't mind Jonathan Taylor getting another chance. I didn't want his chance at Alabama.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was fair. If you've been booted from an SEC school, just like I said the same thing about Nick Marshall and Cam Newton and the other kid that wound up at Mettenberger from Georgia at LSU. I said, if you get booted from one SEC school, you shouldn't be able to go back to another conference school. Period. Yeah. I mean, you're sending the wrong message to the conference. I'm all for second chances. I was for Jonathan Taylor having a second chance. I'm for Jeffrey Simmons having a second chance.
Yeah. But
I'm not for just saying, hey, let's miss the South Alabama game and let's move on.
Yeah.
That's just not enough.
Yeah, and I agree completely. Well, what I was trying to get into is a little bit more of the media days and everything. I know that's a huge story right there, and that's one of the main topics I wanted to touch on that, just because I was just kind of shocked as well at what the decision happened and how he handled the entire interview and everything. So before we wrap it up and everything, last thing I want to touch on is the Alex City 10U boys are playing in Texas this week in the national tournament. They're still out there trying to raise money and fundraising. They are traveling over 900 miles away. So if you want to donate, or if you want to send anything for them, you can go to GoFundMe.com. Type in 10U Alabama State Champions, and you can donate there. That they've been able to raise some money over the past couple of weeks. So, and we wish them all the luck. And we're going to have them on as soon as they return and everything, and we'll keep you updated on how everything goes with that. But Luke, it looks like we're up against the clock tonight. I appreciate you coming in and sitting with me and talking a little bit about the SEC and football camps and everything. And I'm sure we'll do this again, either on here or
Sports Blitz Live.
Yeah, Sports Blitz Live or wherever it may be. But from staff here, the Lake Martin Sports Roundup, I'm Adam Blankenship. This is Lou Robinson. Coming tonight, still at JR Sports Bar and Grill. Get your hot wings, chicken fingers, and best food in town. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.